6 a.m. came all too early. The alarm blared in my ears, and I forced myself out of bed, groaning. The sun had just crested over the hill, and the sky was lit with the pale gray of dawn. I could hear the rooster crowing already. I looked out the window, scanned the farm. But everything looked normal. All the sunflowers were facing halfway towards me, in direction of the rising sun. The cornfield was still. The chickens were milling about the coop, pecking the ground. I went downstairs, grabbed the bag of feed I'd never put away, and went out to the coop. The chickens were probably the only part of the farm I liked. The fat little hens ran towards me as I poured the food onto the ground. Making happy noises, they pecked it up. I locked the gate and started over the hill, towards the shed, to get the goat feed. That's when I heard it. Oink! I stopped in my tracks. The Gershon's note said they didn't own any pigs. Oink! The note didn't say anything about avoiding the pigs, though. So I was free to go fetch the goat feed. Right? I started walking again, up the hill. Oink! And that's when I realized there was something off about the sound. It almost sounded human. Like a person saying oink instead of an actual animal sound. For a second I had a weird mental image of a naked man covered in his own filth, crouching on the ground, saying oink over and over. Oink! I shook my head and continued up the hill. And when I got to the top, I saw the source of the noise, a fat, pink pig, standing in the grass. I let out a breath of relief. See? It's just an ordinary pig. I passed the pig, ignoring it completely, and opened the shed. Put the chicken feed back. Pulled out the goat feed. Started back up the hill. I stopped dead as my eyes fell on the pig. Its face. It almost looked human. Its fleshy, pink snout was shorter than it should be. Its curled little ears sat low and flat on its head. And its eyes, they weren't round and beady, but almond-shaped, like a person's. With dark pupils that stared up at me in a way that suggested intelligence. The feed bag fell out of my hands. I stumbled back. But the pig didn't advance. It just stared at me with its human eyes. I backed away, keeping my eyes on it. Slowly walked around it so that I was going back towards the house. When I got over the hill, and that horrible little face was finally out of my sight, I whipped around and broke into a run. What the fuck was that? I panted to myself as I locked the front door behind me. Not knowing what else to do, I pulled out my phone and called the police. But when they picked up, I wasn't sure what to say. I started. Found a pig that doesn't look like a pig. On the farm. The Gershon's farm. Did you touch the pig? The officer cut in. What? Did you have any contact with the pig, any at all? No. Good. We'll send an officer out to deal with it. 15 minutes later, I saw a police car pull up the driveway. They asked me where I'd seen it, then told me to stay inside. I went over to the window and watched them walk up the hill, then disappear. A minute passed, then a shrill squeal erupted in the silence. 5 minutes later, the officers reappeared, carrying a large black plastic bag that swung with each step. Hey, hey! I called out as they headed for the cruiser. What was that thing? The officers glanced at each other. Rabies, the female officer said, while the male stuffed the bag into the back seat. A bunch of rabid pigs have been showing up in this area. Gonna send it off to get tested. Good thing you didn't touch it. Before I could ask her more questions, she hopped into the driver's side. And then they were gone. I stared out the window, utterly perplexed. Why didn't the Gershons tell me to stay away from the pigs? After the debacle with the pig, I decided to take it easy. I made a wholesome breakfast, read a few chapters of the thriller I was working through, and called my boyfriend. Around 11 a.m., though, I realized I'd forgotten to stock the farm stand. It was still technically morning, so I ran out into the field, filled my hod with zucchini and tomatoes, and ran down the driveway as fast as I could without spilling any of the produce. But as the little farm stand came into view, I saw that there was already someone waiting. I checked my watch, 11:49 a.m. I'm so sorry, I breathed as I spread the produce out on the wooden table. I was supposed to get this out earlier, but there was a pig, and it just... Something made me stop rambling. I glanced up to see that the person standing there was a little odd. He was an old man, probably about 6 feet tall, and very thin. He wore, surprisingly, a crisp black suit and an old-timey bowler hat in the sweltering heat. He was smiling at me, but his teeth were deeply yellow and crooked, and his eyes were sunken back in his skull. Nothing unnatural about him, just a slightly creepy-looking old guy, but in a way, he reminded me of the creepy dudes from that one Buffy the Vampire episode where they take away everyone's voices. "So, what are you looking for today?" I asked, when he didn't move to take any of the produce. "The Gershons aren't here?" I shook my head. "Won't be back for 2 weeks. He said, thoughtfully. "They didn't tell me they were leaving." "Oh, you know them?" He let out a small chuckle. "You could say that." I waited for him to either take produce or leave. But he didn't do either. He just stood there, looking at me. The way his blue eyes cut into mine made a chill run down my spine. It wasn't a predatory or sexual stare. It felt more like he was examining me, studying me, trying to read every tilt of my head and blink of my eyes. It made me extremely uncomfortable. "So, are you interested in any of this?" "The tomatoes look really good today," I said, trying to not sound nervous. "Or if you're looking for something else, I can go pick it for you. Only the Gershons can provide what I'm looking for." "Okay, well, I'm going back up to the farm. If you change your mind, the prices are listed on the whiteboard, and you just leave the money in the box." I shot him a fake smile, turned around, and headed up the hill as quickly as I could without seeming weird. But then he said something that made my blood run cold. "Emily?" I never told him my name. The smartest thing would have been to run. But instead, I turned around. He wasn't chasing me. He was still standing at the farm stand, 10 yards from me. "I wouldn't trust the Gershons if I were you," he called out. Then he turned on his heel and strode away. As I watched him go, I realized there wasn't any car parked at the bottom of the driveway. He just turned onto the old country road and walked away. I watched him until he rounded the bend and disappeared from sight. I retreated into the house, checked all the locks, and decided I would spend the rest of the day inside, at least, until it was time to feed the animals and stock the farm stand again.